This is going to be a video on how to fix these vents if they're broken. I had two of these, the two center ones, where the louvers inside. One of them actually had some damage to one of the things that I need to fix up. The other one, just through, I guess, just moving these really quickly, had popped it out of the little slots, and one of the big louvers out the back there was just flopping around. So I had to pull them apart to get them, to fix them. Before I start, what's obvious with these is whilst they're really nicely designed, if you slap these around, things will break or they'll pop off and then they won't work anymore. So be nice to them and they'll be nice back to you. To get these out, in the past what I've done is I've just got, when it's in the car, got a pry tool, lifted these up and then just wiggled them out. There's a tool that BMW talks about in the workshop manual to pull these things out, and this is just a makeshift version one of those, and it works a lot better than doing what I used to do. It's just a piece of 3mm fencing wire with this bend in it and a hook on the end, and what it does is it feeds in here and hooks around the back there, and all you do is just give it a good tug and that'll just pull it out of the clips. The size of this, that is about 6 inches long, a little bit less than that. It needs to have a bend of about 15mm in it, and that hook there needs to be a proper little hook. If it's at right angles, it'll slip off the back as you're trying to tug it. So when you're putting this down here, it's important not to put it at the top or on the left hand side, because there is a connecting piece that joins all the separate sets of louvers, and if you damage that or reef them off, then clearly that's not going to be so good. So down the right hand side, put it above the louver where this little control bit is here, and then we're going to feed that down so it's sort of at 90 degrees, and then once we get it to the end we can rotate it around, and then I can give it a good yug and that'll pull it straight out. Once we get the thing out, and of note on the center two vents you won't have a speaker, but on the side vents there'll be the tweeter in here. You'll need to disconnect that. But what we're trying to do is get this piece out, and this section here is separate from the rest of it. There's a whole bunch of clips that hold it on, but also in the factory they melt these tabs here on. So what you'll need to do is, I'm not sure you can see there, but there's that tab there, that one underneath there, that is being melted to that one there. And so all I did, on the first one I dremeled it from this side and cut through, which sort of makes a bit of a mess of it, but then I've worked out that if you just use a knife like this and sort of stick it in there and look at where you actually need to cut just a little bit further forward of that tab that it's melted onto, and sort of dig the knife into it and then just work it way through, in about 30 seconds or so you'll get yourself all the way through, and do that on both sides. And then once you've done that, then what we're going to do is pull this apart, and there's a whole bunch of clips all the way down the side here, as well as a couple in here. And what we're going to do is pull on the bottom and then just lift this up, and they will just separate like this all the way along, like that. And then once it's like that, so it doesn't pop into place when you go to the other side, just shove something in there, and then we're going to go to the other side and do the same thing. And then once it's like that, there are two clips in here, one on each side. So if you go to that hole there, and what that actually looks like, here's one that I pulled apart previously. It's that little barb there that we're going to press down on one side and then the other. So get a screwdriver and we're going to press down there like that. Then that side will move off, and then we're going to do the other one. And then the whole thing pulls apart. And then this comes separate. That can be put off to the side. And now we're going to dismantle this part here. So you can do the stuff at the front. If we want to do the louvers on the inside, those three on the inside, I'll need to take the front off. And we've got the thing that opens and closes it at the back here, which is all pretty simple to disconnect. So if I want to do the one at the back first, all I'm going to do is pull up, there's a little ball in there, and that just pops straight out like that. And then to remove this wheel at the top, all I'm going to do is those two barbs here, I can just squeeze in with my fingers and that'll just pull straight off. Now note, there's a little metal thing there, that is the thing that gives you the feel when you click it, sort of move it back and forth. So make sure that stays in place. If you need to remove that little arm there, you can see it just gets keyed in and then just rotate it around like that. To remove this thing here, first thing we need to do is remove this key there. So we want that fully open, and it's a bit hard to see, but on the inside here, and what it looks like on another one, is that is pushed down in there like that, and in the shaft there are these little things that are just barbed into and keyed into the little flapper valve. So all I'm going to do is put a screwdriver in here and put it into the hole and push that up, and that thing will just pop straight out of there. And then once that's out, it's just sort of pivoted on a large one there and a small one. I can just lift that up and that'll just rotate out, and there's my little valve, and that's how that would have keyed into it like that. With the key itself, there's a little notch there and a little corresponding bit there which tells you which direction that's actually going to go to. So that would go down in there like that there. Obviously we're just trying to do that to pop that out. On the other side, what we're trying to do is remove these. We're going to do the top one first, then the bottom one, and then all three in the middle will come out together. And the way they work is that they are slotted in, clipped into these little pivot points at the corners here. So what I'm going to do is, if it's, sometimes they're sort of sticking out a little bit, sometimes not. Sometimes you can just grab them and pull them out like that, and they'll pop straight out, which is all fine. And then we're going to do that on the right hand side. So we're just going to pull it out on the right hand side first, and then this one will just pull straight out. And you can see in there, there's a little hole, which is what's locked into that there, which is what allows it to move up and down, and obviously there's a pivot on the other side. And the bottom one is the same, so I'm going to pull it out. The bottom one's a bit harder to get out because you don't have as much room. You might need to get a little screwdriver and sort of just pop that out like that. And then that just pulls straight out. Now it's a bit hard to get all these mixed up because they are just big top to bottom. And now these three are clipped in a little bit differently. So what I'm going to do is undo all of these, just push those out. And once they are out, then this whole thing pulls out together. And these things here, they're not, they don't have like knobs that go into the holes. They get pushed in, and you get, best way to get these out is just to sort of squeeze them like and push away with the tips of your fingers, and they just pull out like that. Hopefully you can see that's a little bit differently, or a bit different. And the center one has this little funny attachment there, and that was slotted onto the thing in the middle here. If we want to disconnect this thing, because this was actually the thing that was broken on my other one, as you can see, little piece of plastic there which holds onto that there. It had been snapped off, so I've drilled a little hole in there, a little piece of aluminium, super glued that in there, and that works fine now. But to pull this apart, the way you're going to do that is there are sort of sides, and I guess it's the side without the knob there. There's all these pins sort of sticking out, so if you just get your thumbnail and sort of just put it in there and just pry that apart, that just comes apart, and there it is. And what you'll see there is another one of those little metal clips which goes on the inside here, and that gives you that feel of that center position. If you put it in the wrong way, it feels all bound up and it's clearly wrong, so it can only go in one way. And all these pins here slot into corresponding positions on that. So the way to put this back together again is you're sort of going to put it half on. Make sure we do it the right way around. And then this thing goes on like that, and notice like there are obviously two sides to it, but there are bumps on that side. The bumps on this one here go next to that bump there, and then that gets pushed on. And it's a bit hard to see, but those pins that were sticking out of this bit go through there, and they help hold on to that there. So if they break off, this thing falls off, which is what had happened to the other one. But now to remove these bits here, and they just have pins top and bottom that just go into the casing. You want to remove the center one first. What you want to do is go from the bottom, so pull out, and then that'll just rotate out, and then pull out from the top. Like that. And with these, there's the pin top and bottom that goes into the casing, and then there's this little thing here which is going to be attached to this little metal piece at the back there. I'm not sure if you can see that, but it's the thing that holds it as it moves left and right, and that one actually slots into it that way. So this needs to be pulled out forward, and then these other two can easily be pulled out afterwards. All of that. There we go. And they come out like that. So there's that piece of metal that would have held it together. So that would sit in there like that, and this one here would have slotted back into it. Now what you'll notice with these at the side is that whilst they look pretty much exactly the same, one's a little bit smaller than the other. Probably the only thing that is determining which way is which, you can see this, there's just a tiny little bump here. That is to point towards the inside. So what that means is when it's in, that one there is going to be on the left, because if I had it swapped on the other side, that would be pointing towards the outside. So that needs to be pointed towards the inside. And now that's the whole casing completely pulled apart. So once you've done your fix, or you've worked out where the problem is, now we can put it all back together again. These center louvers here, the ones that are slotting in the back, are probably the hardest. This is the way that I would do it, and certainly the way that I've found it works reasonably well. I'm going to put in one of the outside ones first. So I'm going to put in the one with the dot, so that's going to go on the left-hand side, and I put it in the top here, put that in the hole. And before you do this, clean it all out. It's going to be full of grease and gunge over years, so get rid of all of that. So I'm going to slot that in the hole first, and then you just push it rearward until it clicks into place in the bottom here. And then what I'm going to do is get this thing and put it on it. So I'm going to feed that in from the back, and I'm just going to use a small pair of pliers, and I'm going to put it over the top of that knob and push it down on it. And it's going to be a bit hard for you to see what I'm doing. And once it's on, it'll just hang on there. Then I'm going to come around the other side, and I'm going to put the center one in. So again, I'm going to put that in there like that, push it, that bottom one rearward so it locks into place, and then I'm going to go to the back, and I'm going to move everything so it's aligned so I can push it. I'm not sure if you can see in there, but I've pushed that one in there so it's in the right spot. Now what I'm going to do is come around, and I'm going to put the last one in. And it's a bit hard to see, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and lift this up, and so it goes over that knob. And the best way, and obviously I had lots of hands in the way there, is to press down, so towards the outside of the casing on that piece of metal, and then just swivel the one that's not connected underneath it until it pops into place. And now that's all good like that. Now we need to organise this contraption over here. The first thing I'm going to do is get this bit, and I'm going to put the centre one on it. So the centre one, obviously it needs to be on the left-hand side, so that's going to just clip into place. And the difference, you can see the difference between that and that. You can see that one's clearly the one that goes in at the end, because that's the thing that's going to slot into the hole here, whereas this one is going to clip into there. So I can put that onto there. And with the orientation of this, you can see that the little sort of triangle bit here, that points downwards like that, and that's the thing that stops it from going too far when you're maneuvering it. And then the bottom one is going to go in there. And that's clipped into place. And now we're going to put this on. So that thing there needs to slot into that hole there, and now I'm going to go ahead and put these in on the left hand side. And then once they're all in on the left-hand side here. What I found is it's easy for this thing to get bound up, so just wiggle this back and forth, put your finger over the left-hand or the right-hand side so they can't come out of where they need, but then wiggle this back and forth, up and down, to check that, to ensure that everything is in the right spot, and then once it's in the right place, then you can just push those in. And again, I'm going to move that left and right. We still haven't got the top and bottom one in there. That's fine, because now it's pretty simple just to maneuver that. I'm not sure if you can see where that piece of metal is up there, but I'm just going to feed the hole over my little knob here and put it in the other side. And then once that's in, again, wiggle it back and forth to check that everything's good. Then I'm going to put that into there. And then I'm going to do the same with the bottom one. The bottom one's a bit of a pain because there's not much room to move. And once you've got it into the hole on the bottom of that metal piece, slot it into the end there, and then you can push it into that side. And then once that's in, everything should work perfectly. Now we're going to put everything at the back in place. So the first thing I'm going to do is put this in. This obviously needs to be at the top, and when you're looking at it from the back, the hole there for where that barb goes into needs to be pointing towards the right. So push in at the top first in the big hole, make sure that's aligned correctly, and then you can just push it in at the rear. That should move freely, that's fine. Have it open, and then I'm probably going to put this thing on first. We need to put our little metal piece in here, like so. And you can see there's lots of grease and stuff around. Before you tidy everything up, I'd just be redistributing that through all the moving parts so everything's nicely greased. So when you're putting this thing at the top, because you're pushing it, you're trying to push that metal tab there, which is going to put pressure on that, it wants to bind and take that off. So what you want to do is, instead of having it sticking towards the front, rotate it like at about 90 degrees, and you can look down here and see where this bit here is going to be, and then we can rotate that around and sort of down, if you like, so it sort of gets into contact with it correctly. And when it's correct, you'll feel that clicking at the fully open and fully closed position. So that's exactly what you want. And now what I'm going to do is I'll put this thing here on. So put this one up in there, and then we can just rotate that around, and now have that fully open like that, and this one is going to face rearwards when that's like that. We can move that out of the way so that's not going to get away, and then that just pushes straight down, clicks into place, and now we can pull that around and shove that little ball in there. Click that into place, and now everything's good to go. And now to put this back on, again, is pretty simple. The tabs on the side here, don't just push it in from the rear. It needs to, that tab there needs to go in that gap there, so that it goes down and then pushes into place, and then that little slot of plastic there goes in between that gap in there. Can you see that? It's pretty obvious. And then once that gets put into the right position, you can then just push the whole thing forward, and it just clips into place. And what you want to do is obviously go around and check that all of those clips are correctly engaged. You should be able to see in that window down in here that it is. And then you can go ahead and super glue this back again, or mate, that is so secure, I don't think it's going to be a problem, that you could quite happily just leave that like that. But maybe if you wanted to, put some super glue in there. But certainly the way I used to pull it out, by pulling it up at the bottom here, you would want to have that pretty secure. But using a tool like that where you're pulling it out from the rear, I don't think that would be a problem at all. Sometimes when you're removing these clips break off, and the way these are put together, you can see the difference between that one and that one. This one's broken off. They put this over the top, there's a couple of pins there, and they just melt them on there, and sort of like a rivet, they just sort of flatten out to hold it in place, but they're clearly not very strong because I've had a number of these break. I've just super glued that back on, so I would go ahead and do that. And also I would definitely advocate putting some grease on all of these so they come out more easily next time. Also for the left and right, middle, left, middle, right. Because these look very, very similar. They are very subtle differences in their shape, and they won't fit exactly right. They'll go in there, but they won't fit exactly right if you put them in the wrong spot. So to remove, make sure the vent is open, right-hand side, above the louver where the control is. Slide it down, make sure it's hooked around the back, and then we're just going to pull it rearward. It's going to pop out about 1 centimetre or so. We can take the tool out, and now that will just come straight out. When you're installing, make sure you look at these guides here that go into these spots there. So look down the side and put those in, and then once they're in, push it down at the back and then just push it into place.